Welcome to What's the Scenario with PLRB, where we explore claims and coverage scenarios relevant to insurance professionals. I'm Brennan McLaughlin.
I'm Mike Brode.
And I'm Tonda Lee.
Yay! Education team in the house.
All right.
Woo-hoo.
Awesome.
Hey, Brennan, I
Yes.
wonder what fabulous scenario we'll be talking about this week. Want to tell us?
Yes.
All right.
So, Swine Dine Farms underwent a devastating loss when a ventilation system shut off, resulting in the deaths of 2,400 hogs.
Oh, tragic.
Swine Dine didn't own the hogs. They were contract growers, raising the hogs for an integrator, the contract owner of the animals, suing for the value of the lost hogs. What liability coverage is available for these folks?
Ooh.
All right, so before we get into that, I've got some trivia here. So which one of these is not a saying by a famous fictional pig?
Ooh.
Is it "that'll do"? 4 legs good, 2 legs bad? That's all, folks? Or "I don't want to die"? It might be a trick question. Let's see what you think.
I'm getting stumped. I'm going to pick one. I'm just going to put myself out there and say, I feel like "I don't want to die" is from Charlotte's Web. So it's not that one. I feel like that's from Charlotte's Web because I'm a fan of that. That's all, folks. We know that one.
I was going to see if you could name them too. Yeah.
Well, I don't even. Wait a minute, Tonda. This isn't. I'm not even getting
I'm eliminating them. Sorry. I feel like it's the first two.
You got a 50-50 there.
Are you changing your guess now, Tonda?
No, I'm stuck. I'm digging in my brain trying to figure out what it might be. I'm gonna go with
your first choice. You always gotta go with your first choice.
4 legs good, 2 legs bad. I don't know.
Well, that's what I was going with.
Brennan's smiling. What's
All right.
Well, wait a minute. Whoa. I don't think Tonda's ever officially made a guess.
Oh, I said good, 2 legs bad.
Okay. Because I was going to go with that one too, because I'm thinking that's them chickens versus cows in the whatever restaurant that is, where they're saying eat more chicken kind of a thing.
All right. Well, I did get you with my trick question here. So you got the one that is Charlotte's Web, is "I don't want to die." And I think you all know who that's all, folks. That's Porky Pig.
Porky.
4 legs good, 2 legs bad. That's from Animal Farm. And that is one. And "that'll do" is if you ever heard that phrase, I think it's from that's from Babe, right? Yeah, that's from Babe. But that's the farmer saying it. It says, "That'll do, pig. That'll do."
Oh, that was a bit.
That's the farmer saying it. But yeah, so we had to get into some fictional pigs this week.
Wait a minute. I want to fact check on this one after the fact here, because you didn't sound too convinced on your own. "That'll do." So I'm thinking this whole thing needs to be thrown out, and Tonda and I are correct.
I always get Babe and Charlotte's Web confused.
Good point.
But no, "that'll do." It is from a pig movie.
All right.
But it's the farmer saying it.
Okay.
The pig.
All right.
Even though Babe can talk, he doesn't get the most famous line from the movie. So
that's sad.
Yeah, I know. All right, let's head into the scenario.
Let me put this out there first, because this is like the second animal one that we've had, and all these animals are dying, so it's very depressing to me. We have burnt chickens, and now we got, I don't know, suffocated pigs, and it's just tragic. So I'm hoping our next podcast can be something a little more light, and there's too much death on these podcasts, Brendan. So at
least the last two.
Right. So we got to come up with new stuff. So I'm just curious, kind of like when we were talking about chickens way back when. Well, now we're talking, this might be a liability thing. That one was more of a property one. So what policy here are we talking about, Brian? How do we, and this whole thing with contract growing and who owns them? And at least this time we didn't say we're harboring these pigs. We're just somehow they're hanging out with us someplace. So what kind of policy are we talking about here, Brennan?
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at farm commercial liability coverage forms. If we're looking at one as an example, an AIS form AL 00010919. Just an example of a farm liability policy. This particular one appears to exclude property damage to property loaned to you under P. And there's also an exclusion, property damage to either business personal property or non-business personal property in the care, custody, or control of the insured. But there's an exception to that exclusion. If we have a lot of fun in this space with exceptions to exclusions. Right. That's, I think, where people check out. You've got the two E words, and you're doing an exception to an exclusion.
Right.
But there's an exception to this exclusion, which would mean there's coverage generally for custom farming. But the definition for custom farming excludes property damage to either business personal property or non-business personal property in the care, custody, or control of the insured. The reason why I bring this up is because, this is sort of a general farm commercial liability coverage form, right? But we've got a really specific farm going here. We've got a contract grower.
Right.
And in this more general form, we're not finding necessarily an easy path to coverage here. It doesn't seem like it's quite the right fit.
I was going to say, I think that analysis is so important because sometimes we do forget to check for exceptions to exclusions. And then it seems like custom farming is also defined in the policy. So there's so many good reminders here, just like general policy coverage analysis. But one thing that just stuck out, just remember, so it seems like the owner is suing the contract farmer for the loss of these pigs, suffocated pigs. And, they're probably, seeking some type of recovery from them. And there's a potential claim if there's not already a lawsuit. So I'm just wondering, again, does the contract come into play at all with this type of claim? I know we talked about previously last week on that podcast with the poor chickens, how the contract could be pertinent to the coverage analysis. I'm wondering if that's the same here now that we're dealing with the liability claim.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the first things that's recommended in this space, if you're an adjuster, is to obtain that contract between that insured contract grower and the contract owner and look into that language carefully. These contracts, like you've been saying, these contracts often lay out, hey, we own the hogs. This is what you're allowed to do with them. Here's how you handle these situations. Some can get very, very descriptive. Often they contain a force majeure clause, which we can take a look at.
Wait a minute. That sounds French to me. I don't know. What? Force majeure?
Yeah, you got to know a little bit of French, or at least the Old English version of French to get by and through law school sometimes. This clause protects the parties to a contract, and it's not just, by the way, not just in the farming context. If you hear force majeure talked about, that kind of protects the parties to any contract from unforeseen events that are outside the party's control. So in this case, I'll go through what one of these clauses sound like. No party shall be liable or responsible to the other party, nor be deemed to have defaulted under or breached this agreement for any failure or delay in fulfilling or performing any term of this agreement, except for any obligations to make previously owed payments, blah, blah, blah. And to the extent such failure or delay is caused by or results from acts beyond the impacted party's reasonable control. Let me try to shorten that a little bit. So no party shall be liable to the other party, so this is referring to both parties of the contract, for any failure to fulfill the terms, right? Due to when that failure is caused by acts beyond the impacted party's reasonable control. So that reasonable control part is going to be pretty important. Yes. Following a force majeure event. So it's limited to specific events. In this case, it lists flood, fire, earthquake, or explosion. So I think in our last podcast, we talked about fire. That might get an exclusion here. In this one, we're talking about ventilation issues, so maybe it wouldn't apply. But you do want to, that's just an example of one thing you want to check that contract for, because it could end the responsibility of your insured if there's no business income loss here at all. If there's no loss here, then that's where that contract really comes into play.
Yeah. Maybe our insured. Oops, sorry, Ton. I was going to say even maybe our insured gets paid for like all the feed and all the other stuff they outlay that they spent before this whole thing happened under that force majeure clause potentially.
Well, as you were reading that clause, the first thing that came to my mind is just to be cautious about, again, coverage and liability. So a lot of times we have the defense of the insured against that claim. And a lot of times there's the firewall between that defense work and the coverage work. And sometimes, in the sense of this contract provision, you might have some lead in, which means it might be applicable to the coverage and the defense side. When I read that, I was really thinking about the defense hat came on. It's like, even if there was coverage, maybe you waive your right to recovery via this provision if, there's evidence to support that this loss was caused by an act of God or one of these listed catastrophes. So it just reminded me of the importance to recognize when you might have a coverage versus a defense issue. And just in so many companies, those two will be firewalled or handled separately. So you just need to be cognizant of that when you're reading something like that provision.
Good point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I had a question, though.
Sure.
Brennan. I'm allowed. If it pleases the court, sir, I would like to ask a question. Now, we talked about the underlying policy and some force majeure language, but I'm curious, are there any endorsements that might have come into play here? Something else an adjuster should always check on?
Great question. Yeah. So let's say you don't get lucky and, you're not finding coverage under the main policy. You check the contract and you're not finding some kind of clause that lets everybody off the hook here. You keep looking through that deck page and you find an endorsement. We're going to consider a unique example here. We're looking at FO 900-1221, limited care, custody, and control of confined livestock. Sounds pretty applicable.
Yeah.
This form specifically covers all sums to which an insured is liable by law to a contract owner for property damage caused by an occurrence due to asphyxiation, suffocation, hypothermia, causing death to covered animals. So here we are at that suffocation form.
Wow.
Very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to highlight, we talked about it earlier. You mentioned, Brennan, care, custody, and control, even defining what that is. But assuming that's the case here, this endorsement is right on the money. So, hopefully, if they want coverage, they have this type of endorsement added to their policy.
Well, what's so interesting about this coverage is that equally to the extent that it's applicable and narrow to, this specific situation, it's also really limited in its what it does cover. So it doesn't cover property damage to those covered animals arising from fire, lightning, windstorm, hail, smoke, vandalism, malicious mischief. Mike, sorry.
What?
I know, no coverage for that. No coverage available under your first-party property policy for the covered animals. And that, again, we're harkening back to what's the purpose of exclusions. It's very often to make sure you're looking at the right policy. So this is saying, hey, if there's already coverage under first-party policy,
right,
the limits or whatever that are applicable to this endorsement aren't going to apply. You're going to want to go back to that first party. And then it's also got some really specific exclusions for electrical interruption occurring away from the insured premises, and then arising from failure to maintain an improved alarm system, maintain in good working condition auxiliary power generating equipment. So, this is doing a lot of work for an endorsement. It's saying, here's what you need to do as a contract grower. You need to not just have, this equipment in good working order. You need to have an alarm system so you hear when it's starting to break down. You need to have backup generator. It's really expecting a lot from these folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why? Any idea, Brennan? Why? Geez, Pete. Very specific. A lot of requirements.
Well, hey, I think it goes back to what you're talking about in the beginning, that this is a devastating thing to happen.
Right.
To one extent, you really don't want this kind of devastating loss to these creatures. To another extent, it's a major loss. There's a lot of money at stake in these situations, and these are sophisticated insureds. So you can expect a lot from them. But let's head into some key takeaways, and we'll wrap up here.
All right.
All right, so the first key takeaway is get the contract. As Tanda mentioned, it can often be very specific about what the liabilities are and how these situations should be handled. It can even specify the applicable policy, and maybe even, or if the endorsements aren't there, they'll be in the deck page. The next thing is, again, check that deck page, check the limits. There can be a per head limit on some of these policies and endorsements. Limits are going to be really important in this space. And the third takeaway, contract growers and other farmers are often expected to have a certain level of sophistication. So when you look at these policies, look at these endorsements, and they seem really strict, they might be strict because there's a high level of expectation on the insured. So
insured, but not the swine, right? So these are very sophisticated swine. Is that what you're trying to say, Brennan?
They all can talk, just like our fictional pigs.
Exactly.
So we expect a lot from them.
Right.
Yeah. All right, Mike, where can an adjuster go to learn more?
Well, of course, Brennan. Where would you go? You'd go to your friends at plrb.org, check anything out. We have recorded webinars, believe it or not, on a town hall that we had with some of our farm bureau companies, which was exciting. And there's also a CE course on specialized equipment losses that might come into play with any kind of farm fun stuff. But anyways, like I always say, come on out to plrb.org, float around, check the different hubs out. You're going to find something that you want to learn more about. So head on out there. Oh, and you're going to share that, right, Brennan?
Absolutely. And in those show notes, you'll find a recap of the key points from this episode and links to our social media. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us, and please give us a call at 630-509-8704 and leave a voicemail to share your adjuster story.
Yay.
Hey.
All right. We'll see you next time.
All right.
The views and opinions expressed in this resource are those of the individual speaker and not necessarily those of the Property and Liability Resource Bureau, its membership, or any organization with which the presenter is employed or affiliated. The information, ideas, and opinions are presented as information only and not as legal advice or offers of representation. Individual policy language and state laws vary, and listeners should rely on guidance from their companies and counsel as appropriate.